Greetings and salutations to all. I am Professor Dr. Namita Rajput, Professor in Department of Commerce, Sri Aurobindo College, University of Delhi. In the ongoing series of Art of Being Happy, today we will be discussing a pertinent topic called culture and happiness. We will be talking about the meaning, elements, functions, the cultural values and happiness, and what influences the culture has on emotional expressions, followed by creation of technology and happiness, and creating a culturally inclusive society for happiness. So let us start with the meaning of culture. One definition of culture is the set of shared assumptions, norms, and practices that characterize a given group of people or society. Now, what is culture? Culture is the whole total of a group's shared values and customs, from the language they speak to the rituals they observe, to the foods they prepare. The importance of culture in molding how people see and relate to the world cannot be overstated. So let us now talk about etymology of culture. Culture comes from a Latin word, cultura, which in turn comes from a Latin verb, coleria, which means to cultivate or to till. The word's original agricultural meaning pertained to the work of preparing the mental, spiritual, and social development. It wasn't until the 19th century that culture came to used in its contemporary sense, referring to the shared norms of behavior and expression. The sociologist and anthropologist started using the phrase to characterize the shared beliefs and the behavior that characterize distinct social groups. The concept of culture became crucial in comprehending and appreciating the variety of human civilizations as societies begin to contact more regularly through trade, colonization, and globalization. The culture has become an integral part of modern cultivation and civilization, and it is ever developing and adapting to the new environments, technologies, and social interactions. It has an important role in forming our identities, shaping our values, and fostering a sense of community. Now, according to E.A. Hoybel, culture as defined by sociologist, the eminent scholar Charles Darwin, is the sum total of integrated learned behavior patterns that are characteristics of the members of a society and are therefore not a result of biological inheritance. Religious food, clothing, accessories, language, wedding, and the musical styles are all a part of person's culture. Culture is the sum total of a group's learned and taught notions about what is right and wrong in terms of how individuals should behave and what should and should not feel. The second is your elements of culture. It is beneficial to consider the culture in terms of the following significant cultural components. The first is the language. An essential component of culture is language, which is used for both communication and expression within a society. It influences how individuals see the world and makes it easier to pass down the traditions, knowledge, and beliefs from one generation to the next. The language influences the social interactions and the customs by reflecting the cultural identity and the values of a society. The language preserves and shares the cultural quirks and common experiences, enhancing the cohesiveness and distinctiveness of a cultural group. The next is your norms. Norms which stand for the unspoken guidelines and the expectations that determine how people should behave in a certain society are another essential component of the culture. They specify what is deemed proper and acceptable behavior under certain circumstances. The norms are essential for preserving the social order, since breaking them might result in punishment or rejection from others. The cultural norms are communicated and learned through socialization, influencing how people behave and interact with their own cultural settings. The third is your symbols. A community's common meanings are expressed by symbols, which might be concrete or abstract items, gestures, or signs. They are an effective means of communicating the complex concepts and the feelings. The national birds, the national flags, the religious images, hand gestures, and even a particular color with the cultural connotations are examples of these symbols. The cultural members have a sense of togetherness and belonging when their values, beliefs, and identity are communicated and passed down through the generations through these symbols. The next is your values. Values are essential beliefs and the concepts that a cultural group regards as valuable and worthy of preservation. They shape people's attitude, behavior, and decisions, reflecting what is morally and socially acceptable in society. The cultural values have an impact on many elements of life, including the family structures, societal standards, and success judgments. They serve as basis for individuals to understand their function within the community and contribute to the culture's generation coherence and identity. The next is your attitude. And individual thoughts, feelings, and behavioral inclinations towards a certain items, person or circumstance are all included in their attitude. These components include behavioral action and intentions, affective, that is emotions and feelings, and cognitive, that is beliefs and thoughts components. The way people view and react to the environment around them, as well as how they make decisions and interact with others, is greatly influenced by their attitude. And it is crucial to comprehend and evaluate these components while researching the social dynamics and the human behavior. The next is your rituals. The rituals might contain a predetermined sequences, symbolic activities, and sacred items that have deep religious or cultural significance. The rituals sometimes entail repeated and organized actions carried out during certain ceremonies or events. And of course, by supporting the values and the customs and societies, these factors contribute to spiritual, social, and psychological facets of human existence. The next is your custom and manners. The social rules and conduct that are commonplace in a culture are referred to as customs and manners. The customs are age-old rituals and behavior that influence how people interact and behave in a particular context. On the other hand, the manners are considerate and courteous behaviors that are required in a regular social encounters. Both conventions and the manners are actually essential for upholding the social peace, the cultural values, and the order in society. And of course, the next is your material culture. The tangible items and artifacts that a civilization produces and employs are included in material culture. These observable components are a reflection of the community's values, behavior, and beliefs. They are important in influencing the customer, the interpersonal relationships, and the cultural identity passed down through the generations. The next is your education. Education is a critical component of culture, covering both official and informal mechanisms for passing on the knowledge, skills, and the values to future generations. It is critical in influencing the people's views, attitude and socialization within their cultural settings. The educational practices reflect a society's cultural interest, beliefs and traditions, impacting the information and skills deemed necessary for personal and societal development. The education promotes the social cohesion and the cultural heritage, the preservation by establishing a shared understanding of the world and one's role within it. Now let us move to a very pertinent topic called functions of a culture. All social groupings have a very high degree of common values, beliefs and preferences. Given that culture appears to be a phenomena shared by all people, it is only natural to investigate whether there are any needs shared by all the people. The purposes of the culture are called into doubt by this enigma. The social scientists have considered a variety of cultural functions. Certain roles of culture are actually important for both individuals and society. Now, following are some of the important functions of a culture. The first is your culture defines the situation and the cues. In fact, culture is quite important in defining the circumstances and the cues. The individual perceptions and interpretations of diverse circumstances, social interactions and environment clues are influenced by the cultural variables. The culture characterizes the situation and clues as follows. The first is your communication and non-verbal clues. The cultural norms govern how people express themselves verbally and interpret a non-verbal cues, including the body language, gesture and the facial expressions. What is viewed as courageous or respectful in one culture could be seen differently in another. Next we have is a social standard and expectations. The culture creates the social standards that outline the proper conduct in the various circumstances. Now these standards dictate how people ought to behave, communicate and engage with others in various social contexts, making decisions and solving the problems. The cultural values and belief systems have an impact on how people make decisions and solve the problems in many contexts. The group agreement, the personal autonomy or hierarchical decision making may be valued differently in the different cultures. Effective cross-cultural communication and engagement requires an understanding of these culture influences on how situations are characterized and cues are interpreted. People who are sensitive to multiple cultures may traverse diverse surroundings with more empathy and respect for opposing the viewpoints. The next is your culture defines the attitude, values and the goals. Despite the fact that culture has a big impact on a society's attitude, beliefs and aspirations, it's important to understand that culture does not totally define these things. Culture is merely one of many elements that have an impact on the human behavior and beliefs in a complicated interactions. The first is your attitude. The interaction of cultural, social, environmental and individual elements shapes the attitude. The personal experiences, education, upbringing and exposure to other viewpoints all play a role in how attitudes are formed, even while culture offers a framework for interpreting the world and has the power to affect the attitude. Now, depending on their own experiences and relationships, people from the same culture might have the different opinions. The next is your values. Values are established convictions about what is significant and good. They are shaped by societal norms and traditions. The values can, however, also be influenced by one's own life experiences, education, exposure to other cultures, and reflection. Now, based on their own moral reasoning and the life experiences, people may support or reject a particular culture belief. The next is your goals. Undoubtedly, the societal expectations and the cultural norms have an impact on objectives that people set for themselves. For instance, people may strive for academic excellence in societies that value the academic performance. However, setting objectives also takes into account one's particular taste, abilities, and desires. Even in societies that place a high value on other objectives, some people may opt to put their own pleasure, their artistic endeavors, or their families first. For instance, in a collectivist culture, people may place a high value on social interactions, harmony, and group welfare, which results in a strong emphasis on the family and community goals. In contrast, an individualistic culture may place a higher value on personal accomplishments, autonomy, and self-expression, encouraging the people to pursue their own ambitions. Now, deeply rooted cultural impacts on the attitude, values, and aspirations and are acquired through socialization process at a young age. And in order to promote a cross-cultural understanding and the successful communication, while acknowledging and respecting the diversity of the human societies. And it is very crucial to comprehend the various cultural influences. The next is your culture defines myths, legends, and supernatural. Indeed, a society's myth, folklore, and superstitious beliefs are greatly influenced by its culture. Now, these cultural components are impacted and developed by the shared beliefs, ideals, and traditions of a group of people. So, here are some important effects of culture on each one of them. The first is your myths. The traditional tales known as myths are used to explain the natural events, the cultural activities, and the beginnings of the universe. They frequently have gods, heroes, and the other worldly characters. The myths are shaped by the culture, which reflects the fundamental ideals, principles, and cosmological concepts of a community. The myths may explain unnatural occurrences, enforce the cultural norms and the moral teachings, and they also provide the insights into a collective identity and the history of a civilization. Every culture has its own distinct myths and are passed down and changed through time. The next is your legends. The legends are the stories that are based on a real life occurrences or people, although they frequently have the fanciful or exaggerated components. They are intricately entwined with the regional customs and the cultural heritage. The legends frequently depict an outstanding characters, the moral quandaries, and a brave act. They serve as a reflection of the values, ideals, and historical events of a community. They help to preserve a society's collective memory and identify while inspiring and amusing others. Now, within a culture, the legends may be unique to certain areas or communities, reflecting their own practices and the values. The next is your beliefs in the supernatural. The cultural notions of a supernatural includes the deities, the spirits, the ghost, and the supernatural creatures. Now, these ideas are fundamental to a community cultural identity and the spiritual rituals. The way these supernatural beings are viewed, reversed, and dealt with through rituals, ceremonies, and offerings is influenced by the cultural norms. The next is your culture provides behavior patterns and the guiding behavior. Now, the provision of the behavioral patterns and the direction of a behavior within a community are significantly influenced by the culture. Individuals acquire and internalize these behavioral patterns through the process of socialization, which takes place within the framework of the culture. So, here are some examples of how the culture shapes and directs the behavior. The social norms and expectations are established by the culture, and they specify how people should act in a certain circumstances. These standards act as a recommendation for appropriate behavior and support the preservation of a societal harmony. The next is your socialization. The individuals learn the behavioral patterns and the customs of their culture from the family, peers, and other social institutions, and through this process, the cultural norms and values are conveyed, and their behavior and responses of the various situations are shaped by this indoctrination. The next is your role expectations. Now, according to their gender, age, social standing, people are given a particular task and obligations by the culture. Now, these expectations for the positions, they affect the behavior and direct how people carry out their responsibilities as the leaders, as an employee, as parents, and as a member of other social groupings. The next is your social expectations. The societal expectations for behavior are shaped by the cultural norms and values, and in order to be accepted and respected in their community, people adapt to these standards. Deviating from these standards may result in social rejection or even the punishment. The next and the last is your institutional and organization culture. Now, beyond influencing the personal behavior, the culture also has an impact on how institutions and organizations and the corporates behave. Every company creates its own distinct culture, which serves as a moral compass for its employees and unites them around the common goals and ideals. Thank you very much.